Welcome, wayward travelers, to the Scarlet Tavern, where stories are told in candlelight and truth is chased like spirits in a bottle. Imagine a quiet mountainside cabin in northern Idaho, a family living off the grid. Then, in a matter of days, in August 1992, a routine warrant service spiraled into an 11-day armed standoff. By the end, 3 people lie dead: a 14-year-old boy, his mother holding an infant, and a federal marshal. The incident draws in the U.S. Marshal Service, the FBI's elite hostage rescue team, and leads to a high-profile federal trial, Senate hearings, and civil settlements. That's the story of Ruby Ridge. But before we go further, a quick content warning. This episode covers a real historical event involving gunfire, the death of a child, a mother, and a law enforcement officer, as well as detailed descriptions of wounds and the prolonged standoff. We'll stick strictly to documented facts, no speculation. If these topics are too difficult for you right now, feel free to pause or skip ahead. Take care of yourself. Tonight at Scarlet Tavern, we're taking a careful chronological walk through the documented events of Ruby Ridge. We'll explore the background that set the stage for everything that followed, the sequence of actions on the days when the violence erupted, how the situation developed and eventually came to a close, and the significant legal and investigative steps that unfolded in the months and years afterward. The Weavers family story begins in the heart of America's Midwest, in the small farming town of Villisca, Iowa, where the rhythms of agricultural life, family bonds, and religious exploration form the foundation for Randy Weaver's early years. Randall Claude Weaver, known throughout his life as Randy, was born on January 3rd, 1948, to Clarence and Wilma Weaver. Clarence and Wilma operated a family farm, a common way of life in rural Iowa during the mid-20th century. Their household included 4 children, with Randy as the only boy among 3 sisters. This sibling dynamic meant Randy often shouldered responsibilities typically expected of the eldest or only son in a farming family, learning the value of hard work, cooperation, and reliability from a young age. Villisca itself was a quintessential small Iowa community in the 1950s and 1960s, characterized by close-knit neighborhoods, seasonal farm cycles, and a strong emphasis on community and faith. The Weaver family's religious life was active but exploratory. Clarence and Wilma did not settle comfortably into one denomination. Instead, they moved among evangelical churches, Presbyterian congregations, and Baptist services as they sought teachings that aligned with their personal convictions and understanding of Scripture. This fluidity exposed the children, including young Randy, to a variety of worship styles, hymns, sermons, and interpretations of the Bible. Family discussions about faith were common, and the Bible served as a central text for moral guidance and understanding the world. These early experiences planted seeds of religious inquiry that would later deepen significantly in Randy's adult life. Randy's childhood unfolded amid the practical demands of farm life. Days often involved helping with planting, harvesting, and caring for livestock and maintaining equipment. Summers brought long hours in the fields under the Iowa sun, while winters required enduring bitter cold and focusing on indoor chores or schoolwork. Like many boys in rural Iowa, Randy participated in community activities such as Little League Baseball, which provided opportunities for physical activity, teamwork, and social interaction outside the immediate family circle. School in Villisca offered a standard public education covering core subjects like reading, writing, arithmetic, history, and science. Randy was described in later accounts as an average student who excelled at hands-on tasks rather than purely academic pursuits. The values instilled at home, diligence, honesty, family loyalty, and respect for others remain consistent themes throughout his formative years. As Randy approached adulthood, he graduated from high school in 1966. Seeking further education, he enrolled at Iowa Central Community College in Fort Dodge. He completed approximately 2 years of studies there before deciding to leave. During this period at community college, Randy crossed paths with Victoria Jordison, a young woman who would become central to his life. Vicky, as she was known, had grown up on a farm near Fort Dodge, roughly 50 miles north of Villisca. Born around 1949, Vicky was raised in a rural environment similar to Randy's, emphasizing practical skills and family responsibilities. She was an excellent student, active in 4-H programs as a member of the Pleasant Valley Pixies, and developed strong abilities in sewing, cooking, knitting, canning, and other domestic arts.
What's 4-H?
4-H is, I'm shocked. Actually, most of you probably don't know it, but it's big. It's big in the South or in farming communities. But 4-H is a program for kids to learn how to farm and take care of cattle, things like that. And then they'll do a lot of times they'll do competitions
You'll
where
see it at fairs a lot.
yeah, you'll see 4-H at fairs. I did 4-H growing up. It's really common if you live near the country. Great program.
Yeah, it focuses on STEM, agriculture, healthy living, and civic engagement. It empowers young people to reach their full potential through hands-on learning, mentorship, and learning by doing projects.
Great program. Those who knew her in her youth described her as intelligent, organized, capable, and warm, with a natural talent for nurturing and creating order in her surroundings. After high school, Vicky worked as a secretary at Sears, bringing efficiency and attention to detail to her professional role while maintaining close ties to her family's farm. For those young kids that watch us, Sears was a big department store similar to Macy's and J.C. Penney's.
Do you know what Sears is?
Yeah.
Okay.
Also, before it was just Sears, it was called Sears and Roebuck.
That I didn't know. I knew they sold
Sears
like
and Roebuck
appliances
is
and clothes.
how it was formed, and then they cut Roebuck out and became Sears. But Randy and Vicky's relationship began to develop more seriously around this time, though it was interrupted when Randy made a significant life decision in October 1968. At age 20, he dropped out of community college and enlisted in the United States Army. His enlistment occurred during the Vietnam War, and Randy served from 68 to 70. Official records indicate he trained and served primarily as a combat engineer, with duties that included engineering tasks, construction, and possibly demolitions-related work while stationed at Fort Bragg in North Carolina. Some later accounts mention possible Green Beret or Special Forces associations, but documented service details point to his role in an engineering unit. And again, there is no record on his DD-214 that he was Green Beret or Special Forces. And typically you would see, even if it doesn't say that, you would see some kind of duty stations that warrant that. So like where he would go to school, go to jump school, things like that. That's all on your DD-214.
No, I think where the myth of Randy being a Green Beret or something was the fact because he was at Bragg, and Bragg is the home of the Green Berets and just Special Forces community as a whole. But yeah, he was not.
Yeah, there's nothing on his DD-214. It goes through and it literally, your DD-214 lists literally everything that you've done in your military career, any achievement you've got, all of that.
Mostly what would probably happen is he might have been attached to a Special Forces unit, but still,
as a combat engineer, more than likely he would have deployed with a Special Forces unit. They use those so much, especially during Vietnam.
But again, it would be mentioned. There would be a record of him being attached to it.
Yeah.
But also, being attached to a Special Forces unit does not make you Special Forces.
No, it gives. I mean, you get some of the, like, you'll get like the unit patch and everything, but that's it. So the military experience provided Randy with structured discipline, technical skills in working with tools and materials, and exposure to a broader world beyond Iowa's farmlands. He maintained contact with Vicky through letters and occasional visits during leaves. In 1970, while back in Fort Dodge on leave, Randy reconnected with Vicky more deeply and their courtship intensified. Randy received an honorable discharge from the Army in 1970 or early 71. Shortly afterward, in November 71, he and Vicky married in a ceremony at the First Congregational Church in Fort Dodge, Iowa. The wedding marked the beginning of their shared life together. The newlyweds settled in Cedar Falls, Iowa, a community in the Waterloo-Cedar Falls area known for its manufacturing and educational opportunities. Initially, Randy expressed interest in pursuing a career in law enforcement and enrolled briefly at the University of Northern Iowa to study criminal justice. Kids, if you're going to go be a cop, don't study criminal justice. It doesn't do anything.
Definitely.
However, the financial demands of tuition led him to drop out after a semester. Should have used his GI Bill. He would have had a GI Bill. We had the post 9/11, obviously, but he would have had the GI Bill.
Well, we could have chosen the GI.
Yeah, you can choose which is better for you.
But had the Montgomery GI
Yep.
Bill, which is still plenty of people have used it.
Oh, yeah.
Then, so
Instead, he secured steady employment at a local John Deere tractor factory, where he worked on the assembly line producing heavy agricultural machinery.
that's a good job.
Yeah. The job offered reliable wages and benefits, allowing the couple to establish a stable household. Vicky continued working as a secretary at Sears Roebuck, contributing to the family income while managing domestic responsibilities. I believe they dropped Sears Roebuck in the 80s, and they went right to Sears. Their home in Cedar Falls was a tidy white brick house on a tree-lined street, representing a comfortable suburban setting that blended elements of their rural upbringings with modern conveniences. The early years of marriage were focused on building a foundation. Randy's factory shifts, Vicky's secretarial work, and the routines of young adulthood. They maintained connections with their families in Iowa, visiting farms and attending holiday gatherings.
Okay, so the official name, Sears, Roebuck and Company, was shortened to simply Sears in the early 1970s, though the full corporate title continued to be used for many years. The company formally reincorporated in... That doesn't seem right. It says 1895.
1985.
Yeah,
Yeah, in 1985.
it says 1895.
It's 1985.
Yeah. After Elvin
Somebody's dyslexic.
left the business, yet the Roebuck name remained in the brand for nearly a century, so it was 1895.
So outwardly, the Weavers appeared as a typical Midwestern couple, hardworking, family-oriented, and integrated into their community. The arrival of children brought new depth and purpose to their lives. Their first child, Sarah, was born March 1976. Vicky embraced motherhood with enthusiasm, transitioning from her secretarial role to full-time homemaking as the family grew. In April 1978, their second child, Samuel, affectionately called Sammy, was born. A third child, Rachel, arrived in 1982. If you notice, these are very biblical names. Sarah, Samuel, and Rachel. Very biblical. Each birth strengthened the family unit, with Sarah taking on helpful roles as the eldest, Sammy, demonstrating an energetic, adventurous personality even as a young boy, and Rachel adding to the lively household dynamic. Family life in Cedar Falls involved shared meals, outdoor play in the yard, participation in local events, and the daily rhythms of raising young children. The Weavers emphasized close family bonds, with evenings often spent together in conversation, play, and basic routines that reinforced unity and responsibility. During these years in Iowa, Vicky gradually emerged as the household's spiritual leader. Around 1978, after Sammy's birth, Vicky began reading books on Bible prophecy and apocalyptic themes, including works like Hal Lindsey's The Late Great Planet Earth.
This is where the slipping down the slope.
This reading sparked a deeper engagement with Scripture, leading her to interpret current events through a lens of end times prophecy. She experienced recurrent dreams that she understood as divine guidance, particularly visions of living on a mountaintop away from the complexities and corruptions of modern society. These dreams, combined with intensive Bible studies, shifted the family's focus toward literal interpretations of Old Testament passages and Revelation. The couple discussed themes of tribulation, faithfulness amid a fallen world, and the need for separation from what they saw as increasingly ungodly influences in government, education, and culture. This spiritual evolution prompted practical changes in their daily life. The Weavers began selling possessions and experimenting with greater self-sufficiency. They visited Amish communities to learn traditional farming methods, food preservation, and living without electricity, and other off-grid skills. Items such as the television were removed from the home as the family grew cautious about graven images and external media that might conflict with their biblical convictions. Nightly Bible studies became a central routine, with emphasis on obedience to what they understood as Yahweh's commands over human institutions. Vicky's passionate commitment inspired Randy and the children to align with these changes. The household gradually reflected an inward turn, devoting more time to prayer, scripture discussion, and planning for a future that prioritized spiritual purity and preparedness.
Yahweh, I believe, is
God.
the formal name of God.
Yes.
In the Old Testament Judaism, yes.
Yes. By the early 1980s, the Weavers' convictions had solidified into a decision to leave their life in Iowa. In 1983, with 3 children, Sarah, Sammy, and Rachel, they sold their home and most remaining possessions. Randy drove a moving van westward while Vicky followed in a pickup truck. The journey represented a deliberate break from Midwestern routines in pursuit of the isolation and self-reliance Vicky's visions had inspired. Their destination was a remote 20-acre parcel of land in Boundary County, Idaho, near the small town of Naples in the Selkirk Mountains.
Which, if I remember correctly, that's at the tippy top of the panhandle of Idaho. That's
Yeah.
pretty close to Canada, I believe.
Yeah. Their property, purchased for around $5,000 in cash, plus the trade of their moving truck. Great fucking deal.
Good Lord, we should look at that. But actually, no, considering who all lives out there,
Yeah.
I don't want to go anywhere near that place.
It sat on a rugged hillside overlooking Ruby Creek across from Caribou Ridge, approximately 40 miles from the Canadian border.
Yeah, it's like right.
Yeah. You could spit
It's
and
at
hit
the-
Canada.
Yeah, it's the tippy top.
You should spit and hit Canada. The area offered the seclusion they sought: boulders for natural defense, a spring for fresh water, forests for resources, and distance from population centers. Hey, man. Those demons can't get through boulders,
Apparently, you know.
but a bullet can.
As we'll find out.
Too soon? No, it's not. Upon arrival in September 1983, the family faced the immense task of building a home from scratch on undeveloped land. They constructed a modest plywood cabin with basic materials. The structure included a main level serving as kitchen, pantry, and living area, plus a second story reached by rickety stairs for sleeping quarters. There was no electricity and no running water. The family hauled water from the spring, heated the cabin with wood, and cooked on simple stoves. Sarah later described the interior as cozy despite its simplicity. 2 couches and comfortable chairs for her parents, big braided rugs on the floors, and a kitchen with a well-stocked pantry, meticulously maintained by Vicky. Vicky added personal touches through sewing curtains, crafting cushions, and staining cabinets, transforming the basic shelter into a welcoming family space. Daily life on Ruby Ridge demanded constant physical labor and adaptation. The family maintained a garden for vegetables, hunted and fished for protein, picked huckleberries and other wild foods in season, split firewood, and managed endless chores.
Be a huckleberry.
I'll be your huckleberry.
A little too deep. Val
Yes.
Kilmer has a much higher pitched voice. I'll be your huckleberry. Okay, Herbert.
No Herbert.
Just say when.
No Herbert.
Laundry was initially done. Do this whole thing as Herbert.
No.
Laundry was initially done by hand in a wash tub with a washboard. Later, after a visit from Randy's father, they acquired a gas-powered wringer washer. The children participated fully. Sarah helped with household tasks and cared for her younger siblings. Sorry. Embraced outdoor exploration and chores with energy, and Rachel adapted to the mountain environment as she grew. Water hauling, wood stacking, gardening, and meal preparation filled their days, fostering resilience and interdependence. Vicky took primary responsibility for homeschooling the children. Lessons incorporated reading, writing, mathematics, and practical skills, all grounded in the family's religious values. This approach shielded the children from what the Weavers viewed as corrupting influences in public education, while ensuring academic development within their isolated setting. Evenings often involved family reading, sometimes 2 books in a single day, along with prayer and Bible discussion. The Weavers held strong apocalyptic beliefs, seeing themselves as preparing for tribulation through literal obedience to Scripture. They referred to God as Yahweh and emphasized family unity, discipline, and moral living according to their understanding of the Bible. Signs on the property reflected these convictions, and daily practices reinforced a sense of purpose amid the challenges of mountain life. Social connections in the remote area were limited but intentional. The family formed ties with a few like-minded individuals and attended occasional gatherings, including several meetings of the Aryan nations at their compound in Hayden Lake, Idaho, about an hour's drive south.
Ugh.
And this will be very key later on.
Mm-hmm.
This will be the reason everything starts. These visits provided rare opportunities for social interaction in a sparsely populated region, allowing the family to connect with others who shared elements of separatist or anti-government perspectives, though Randy was not a formal member.
So, to give you kind of an idea, around this time in the 80s, going even to the 90s, the Pacific Northwest, which includes Idaho, western Montana, Washington and Oregon. These were big for like the Aryan nations, all these white nationalist separatists, including white nationalist religious groups, would build like their little
Compounds.
and everything out here because, as we've seen, land is cheap.
And nobody bothered them.
Yeah, exactly. Now,
until now.
There were a few other incidents that were. I don't want to get too depth in them, but basically there was a big upsurge in white nationalist crime that led the FBI, ATF, and everybody to start looking at this region and be like, hey, this is a problem region, and why they ultimately zeroed in on Randy Weaver.
Yeah, and we'll see exactly why. In the years after the move, the family continued to grow. A 4th child, Elisheba.
What?
Elisheba.
Is that a Bible name?
Yes.
Okay.
Very biblical. Was born on the ridge, bringing the household to 5 children. A family friend, Kevin Harris, began spending extended periods with them, integrating into the close-knit unit.
She was the wife of Aaron.
Yes.
Oh.
Which is, Aaron is the brother of
Moses.
Yes. The cabin became, and who else? The brother of who else?
Miriam?
Yes. The cabin became the center of their world, a place of prayer, learning, labor, and preparation for what they believed lay ahead. The Weavers embraced the hardships of their chosen lifestyle with conviction, viewing their isolation as fulfillment of divine guidance and a path to greater faithfulness. Seasons passed with hunting, gardening, homeschooling, and family bonding, creating a self-contained existence rooted in their deeply held beliefs. As the Weaver family settled into their self-reliant life on Ruby Ridge, forces far beyond their mountainside cabin were beginning to stir. What started as occasional social connections would soon intersect with federal law enforcement attention, setting the stage for the legal troubles that would ultimately bring the outside world crashing into their isolated existence.
And before this was we'll call it a steady decline downhill. Now it's about to go off the freaking cliff.
Yeah. This is before Elliot was born.
Yeah.
I was 5 months old.
I was 4.
I was 5 months old.
I was 1.
It's about 5 years before I was born.
year and 8-ish months.
I was 5 months old. So let that sink in, Ben. So
Hey, it's even worse with me, babe.
Yeah, I know. Let's just not bring it up, shall we?
Ben and I are almost exactly 2.5 years apart.
Yes. And she just loved to find ways to compare that by making me look creepy.
back in 1992, Ben had a full head of hair.
I have a full head of hair.
I was blonde.
So, as the Weaver family settled into their self-reliant life on Ruby Ridge, forces far beyond their mountainside cabin were beginning to stir. What started as occasional social connections would soon intersect with federal law enforcement attention, setting the stage for the legal troubles that would ultimately bring the outside world crashing into their isolated existence, which we already just said. The federal government's first documented contact with Randy Weaver occurred in early 1985, when the U.S. Secret Service launched an investigation based on allegations from neighbors that Weaver had made threats to kill President Ronald Reagan, Idaho Governor John Evans, and other unspecified law enforcement officials. During the course of this inquiry, Secret Service agents learned through interviews that Weaver associated with members of the Aryan Nations, a group active in the region. Agents conducted an interview with Weaver himself, during which he denied both making any such threats and having any formal affiliation with the Aryan Nations. No charges were filed as a result of the allegations. In direct response to these claims, on February 28, 1985, Randy and Vicki Weaver filed an affidavit with the Boundary County, Idaho clerk. In this document, they asserted that the accusations were part of a deliberate plot designed to provoke federal authorities into storming their home. Weaver explicitly wrote that he, quote, may have to defend myself and my family from physical attack on my life.
In all likelihood, Weaver was probably got into a dispute with somebody and somebody just decided to...
I believe we talk about it.
Yeah, we'll get to that.
I don't remember.
I
don't think it is specified, but he did get into an altercation with a neighbor.
Yeah, so... In May 1985, Weaver followed up by sending a letter to President Reagan apologizing for the false allegations made by his neighbors. These early interactions, though they did not result in any legal action, highlighted the Weavers' growing distrust of federal authorities and their perception that they might face unwarranted scrutiny or confrontation. Weaver first drew the attention of the most useless three-letter agency in the world, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, the ATF.
As we're going to see throughout this, this is actually part of a series of that all connect to each other. You will see why we call it the most useless branch of the government.
They should not exist. So this is July 1986. At that time, the ATF was investigating a series of bombings in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho.
Is that how you pronounce it?
I have no idea.
Coeur d'Alene?
Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. I don't fucking know. Care about Idaho.
They're only good for potatoes.
Exactly. In which the Aryan Nations was believed to be involved. As part of this broader probe, the ATF enlisted the help of a confidential informant named Kenneth Fadele, who operated under the alias Gus Magasano and presented himself as a weapons dealer catering to motorcycle gangs and other interested in firearms. Fadele was instructed to gather information from individuals attending an upcoming World Aryan Congress at Hayden Lake, Idaho. During this July 1986 gathering, Fadele was introduced to Randy Weaver. At this initial point of contact, Weaver was not considered a primary target or of particular investigative significance to the ATF. He was simply one of many attendees observed during monitoring of the event.
And this is where we're going to see why it is, in my opinion, the height of stupidity to employ informants. Now, just to be very clear for anybody out there who may be confused, an undercover informant is different from an undercover agent. An informant is a criminal that the government is paying to give them information. An agent is obviously a sworn law enforcement agent. So, yeah. Basically, this Kenneth guy is basically a criminal that the government pays to give them information.
It's my personal belief. I like informants. They've done a lot.
Well,
So
in this
They
case,
do.
there's a difference between, and if, this is, to me, this is wrong because how they ATF handled this guy is my opinion. This is what led to the downfall of the Weavers and what started Ruby Ridge.
No, why? He is legitimately the reason why.
I'm not saying he's not, but you can't group him in with all other CIs. I mean, I've had CIs that have done great things and gave me a lot of information and gave me information on where to serve warrants for some really bad people. So we can't say that CIs shouldn't exist because police work wouldn't get done without them.
In this case, they're just basically treating him like almost giving him the power to go out and find this stuff, and that's not what he's supposed to do.
Depends on his contract too, though, because every CI is given an individual contract, and in that contract they're told what they're supposed to do. Some just give information, some are supposed to go more undercover, because maybe they're already trusted within the organization and it would take too long to get an undercover in there. So this obviously did not work out, but 9 times out of 10 CIs are very useful. Fadley maintained periodic contact with Weaver over the next several years through subsequent gatherings. He met Weaver again in January 1987 and at the July 1987 World Aryan Congress. 6 months after that, in another encounter, Fadley also interacted with Frank Kumnick, an individual suspected of significant firearms trafficking. These repeated meetings at Aryan Nation events allowed Fadley to build a relationship with Weaver gradually. In July 1989, during yet another Aryan World Congress at Hayden Lake, Weaver invited Fadley to visit his home on Ruby Ridge. One thing he should not have done.
Nope.
The purpose of this invitation, according to Fadley's reporting, was to discuss the possibility of forming a group to oppose what Weaver referred to as the Zionist Organized Government, a phrase used by some in these circles to describe the federal government. These conversations reflected Weaver's deepening anti-government and separatist perspectives, which had developed in parallel with the family's religious belief and sense of isolation on the Ridge. On September 8, 1989, at the ATF's specific request, Fadley telephoned Weaver and arranged a meeting for October 11, 1989. The two men met at a restaurant in Sandpoint, Idaho. During this conversation, Weaver mentioned that he could supply sawed-off shotguns if needed. Fadley did not record this particular discussion. 2 weeks later, on October 24, 1989, Fadley and Weaver met again, this time in a city park in Sandpoint. On this occasion, Weaver provided Fadley with 2 shotguns that had been modified by cutting the barrel shorter than the legal limit established under federal law. One shotgun had a barrel measuring approximately 13 inches, and the other measured approximately 12 3/4 inches. According to Fadley's account, Weaver explained that he had performed the modifications himself using a vise and a hacksaw under a shade tree on his property. Weaver reportedly added that once he had a proper workshop set up, he could produce even better results. Fadley paid Weaver $300 for the 2 firearms. It's cheap. This transaction was later documented as the basis for the weapons charges against Weaver. Fadley continued some level of contact with Weaver in the weeks immediately following the sale.
So with that, there is another version of that story that Fadley was the one that told Randy how to modify the guns
Doesn't matter.
because he didn't know how to do it.
Doesn't matter. He still did it.
Yep.
Still committed a federal
Yeah,
crime.
and if he didn't do it with Fadley, he would have found somebody else to do it probably.
Probably.
He still committed a federal crime.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you saw them down like that to do more spread, right?
They make it a little easier to maneuver. Yeah, they can do a little more damage that way, but they typically are just easier to maneuver, easier to hide instead of a long barreled shotgun. And what's funny is he probably got these shotguns at his wife's work because Shotguns were issued to law enforcement by Sears and Roebuck. I actually have one.
Mm-hmm.
We have one downstairs that it was my dad's shotgun, and it's a Sears and Roebuck shotgun.
It's actually really nice.
Great guns.
Handle's pretty. It's actually surprisingly light.
Yeah, but yeah, so I believe the limit is 14 inches. Any lesser than that, and it's a federally illegal, unless you buy it that way. There are some guns that are allowed to be like that because the manufacturer paid for that licensing. So you can get like snub nose shotguns. They're shorter, like more close quarter shotguns, things like that, where they don't have a stock, and those are able to be shorter because the manufacturer paid for it. But I can't take that solid off. That's a federal crime.
Yeah.
So, by late November 1989, specifically after a meeting on November 30th, Weaver had become suspicious of Faddeley. During that encounter, Weaver directly accused Faddeley of being a law enforcement officer. In response, Faddeley broke off direct contact to protect his ongoing role as a confidential informant. ATF agents then reviewed all the information gathered through Faddeley's interactions, including any recorded elements and the specifics of the shotgun sale. On May 21st, 1990, ATF agent Herbert Byerly submitted a formal case report to the U.S. Attorney's Office in Boise, Idaho. In this report, Byerly recommended prosecution of Weaver for the manufacture and possession of unregistered firearms, citing violations of the federal statutes under 26 U.S. Code 5861D and F. Before the case advanced to a formal indictment, ATF agents made one final direct approach to Weaver. On June 12, 1990, agents Byerly and Steve Gunderson met with Weaver in Sandpoint, Idaho. During this meeting, they informed him that they possessed evidence related to the illegal firearms transaction and offered him an opportunity to cooperate as an informant, specifically providing information concerning activities associated with members of the Aryan nations. Weaver refused the offer outright, saying that he would not become a quote-unquote snitch. Following this refusal, the prosecution proceeded without further attempts at cooperation from Weaver.
I would have snitched.
Yeah. On December 13th, 1990, a federal grand jury in the District of Idaho returned an indictment charging Randy Weaver with manufacturing and possessing unregistered firearms. The indictment centered specifically on 2 modified shotguns that had been sold to the informant on October 1989. A warrant was issued for Weaver's arrest. ATF agents evaluated the practical challenges of executing the arrest and determined that attempting to take Weaver into custody directly at his mountaintop cabin would pose significant risks to both the agents and the Weaver children, given the remote, elevated location of the property and the family's general armed status. Instead, they opted for a less confrontational approach that relied on a ruse. On January 17th, 1991, ATF agents carried out the arrest during this planned deception. They posed as stranded motorists whose vehicle had broken down along the road leading toward the Weaver property. When Randy and Vicky Weaver stopped to offer assistance, the agents took Randy into custody without incident. Weaver reportedly commented to the arresting agents at the time, "Nice trick, you'll never do that again." He was transported and held briefly before being arraigned in the following day, January 18th, 1991, before U.S. Magistrate Judge Stephen M. Ayers in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. At the arraignment hearing, the court appointed attorney Everett Hoffmeister to represent Weaver. Weaver was released on a $10,000 personal reconnaissance bond. As a condition of his release, he was directed to appear for trial in U.S. District Court on February 19th, 1991, and to maintain contact with pretrial services. In my opinion, he should not have been released on a $10,000 bond because he's a flight risk.
Yeah.
They already know he doesn't like law enforcement. He's already anti-government. He already has ties with the Aryan Nation. What makes you think that this man is going to listen and come back to court?
I think
Not only that, but he knows how to live incredibly remote too, so he could just shack up anywhere in the woods.
Yeah.
I mean, I gotta believe that maybe somewhere deep down the ATF just hope that, all right, let him go home and stew for a little. Maybe he'll come back to us with an acceptor offer to snitch. I think the ATF really just wanted an informant they could really control and probably not have to pay very much to inform on the Aryan Brotherhood.
Yeah.
Or, yeah, Aryan Nation. I mean, because think about it. With Kenneth, they got to pay him because that Kenneth is just a crook who saw an opportunity probably to make some extra money on the side of his gun running. Randy, I mean, literally all they could say, like, hey, Randy, do what we want you to do, or you go to jail because we got you dead to rights for a federal gun offense. And you're not going to win that no matter what. So that's what I think probably why they did that. But as we're going to see, it really blew up in their faces.
Following the arraignment, communication challenges quickly surfaced. On January 22nd, 1991, Weaver made an initial contact with U.S. probation officer Carl Richens as required by the conditions of his release. However, subsequent efforts to reach him for ongoing pretrial supervision proved difficult. On February 5th, 1991, the U.S. District Court clerk in Boise sent a formal notice to the parties involved, indicating that the trial date had been changed from February 19th to February 20th, 1991. This notice was addressed to the attorneys but not personally sent to Weaver, and this will play a big part. On February 7th, 1991, the U.S. Attorney's Office received 2 letters from Vicki Weaver, dated January 22nd, 1991, and February 3rd, 1991. These letters were addressed to the servants of the Queen of Babylon and employed strong religious-tinged language expressing the family's refusal to comply with what they viewed as an unjust governmental authority. The letters included phrases suggesting that the tyrant's blood will flow and that they would not bow to evil commandments. These communications were forwarded to the probation office, heightening officials' concerns about the Weavers' willingness to engage with the court process. That same day, February 7th, 1991, U.S. probation officer Carl Richens sent a letter to Randy Weaver at the Naples, Idaho address. In this letter, Richens requested that Weaver contact him to establish pretrial supervision. However, the letter contained a significant error. It incorrectly stated that Weaver's trial was scheduled for March 20th, 1991, rather than the actual rescheduled date of February 20th. Another thing that will play a big factor. Richens later described the mistake as a typographical error that occurred while he was attempting to prompt Weaver to make contact. Weaver received this letter but did not respond to Richens or appear for the rescheduled trial date.
Why would he? Was he thinking it's in March?
Yeah.
Yeah.
On February 8th, 1991, defense attorney Everett Hoffmeister sent yet another letter to Weaver, informing him that the trial would begin on February 20th and urging him to contact the defense immediately. Hoffmeister had been attempting to reach Weaver through various channels, including regular mail, but had received no response. On February 20th, 1991, neither Weaver nor its attorney provided any confirmation of attendance.
Now, I will say, this is still also on Randy.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, you don't want to talk to the federal government types for this? Fine.
Talk to your fucking lawyer.
Exactly, because he had the correct date.
Yeah. When Weaver failed to appear in court that day, Chief U.S. District Court Judge Harold Ryan issued a bench warrant for his arrest. The court also considered revoking his bond. In the days immediately following the missed court date, local media began inquiring about the situation. On February 26, 1991, a reporter contacted the U.S. Probation Office and specifically asked whether the missed appearance was connected to the erroneous date referenced in Richens' letter. Upon locating a copy of the letter, Chief Probation Officer Terrence Hummel notified the court clerk, the U.S. Marshal's Service, and Weaver's attorney of the error. Despite this awareness of the mistaken trial date in the probation letter, Judge Ryan declined to withdraw the bench warrant at that time, and justly so, because again, his lawyer contacted him 12 days before the trial and numerous days before that, telling him when the trial was going to happen.
Again, don't want to talk to the government? Fine, talk to your lawyer.
Yeah. On March 5th, 1991, Deputy U.S. Marshals Hunt and Mays initiated contacts with Bill and Judy Grider, who were friends of the Weavers. The Griders provided the marshals with a letter signed by the Weaver family that stated, "We will not obey your lawless government." March 14th, 1991, a federal grand jury returned an additional indictment charging Randy Weaver with failure to appear for trial and violation of 18 U.S. Code 3146A1. This new charge stemmed directly from his absence on February 20th. The government proceeded with both original weapon-related charges and the failure to appear count. An arrest warrant was issued in connection with a new indictment. Notably, the U.S. Attorney's Office did not inform the grand jury of the existence of the erroneous probation letter with seeking this additional indictment, because again, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Yes, that happened, but a letter that happened after that told him the right date. So that letter doesn't matter. With outstanding warrants now in place for both the weapons violations and an FTA, or a failure to appear, the U.S. Marshal Service assumed primary responsibility for apprehending Weaver. This, friends, is what I used to do. My last little bit in law enforcement. This was my job. I would have done it better. On March 18th, 1991, Chief Deputy U.S. Marshal Ron Evans requested assistance from the Marshal Service Special Operations Group, or SOG, a voluntary unit specially trained for handling dangerous or complex fugitive apprehensions. I was never part of a SOG. I got to work with the SOGs. These guys are
elite.
The best of the best. Most of them are the guys, at least I worked with in Florida. We had 3 or 4 Navy SEALs. We had like 4 or 5 Rangers, Green Berets. We even, their team leader was a 25-year guy that was Delta.
Damn.
He was Delta for 25 years at the start of the Iraq War and Afghanistan War. Like these guys are the best of the best. And it's a completely voluntary unit. You're not assigned to it. It's basically, think of it like a U.S. Marshal SWAT team, but just better. Evans compared the Weaver situation to other high-risk cases and requested SOG support to develop a comprehensive arrest plan that minimizes risk to everyone involved. He noted the probability that Weaver might open fire on law enforcement once identified and stressed the importance of finding a method to draw Weaver away from the cabin area.
See, now, I get that Randy is on trial for a gun charge, and he obviously has a lot of anti-government, but by all accounts, he's not a violent man. He's just a dude who wanted to...
I mean,
if you're in the Aryan Brotherhood, can you really say you're not violent?
He also made direct threats to the government.
Yeah.
No,
he literally said blood will flow.
I just feel like, just from reading at this point, I feel like Randy is just a pissed off dude who just made one mistake and he just got way in over his head.
Well, the problem is that his one mistake compounded into multiple mistakes.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
If he would have just showed up to trial, none of this would have happened.
Oh, absolutely.
He probably would have gotten a lesser sentence.
I mean, realistically, as we're going to find out, the more erroneous motives of the paid informant, he might have actually probably gotten off.
Exactly. So on March 28th, 1991, Evans provided a briefing to SOG personnel at their tactical center in Camp Beauregard, Louisiana. During the session, the group decided to dispatch a SOG team to Idaho to gather additional information and formulate a safe arrest strategy. The team's initial assessments described Weaver as extremely dangerous and suicidal. From June 17th to June 24th, 1991, a SOG reconnaissance team traveled to northeastern Idaho and conducted a detailed assessment of the Weaver case. They developed a preliminary plan for the safe arrest of Weaver on his property, preferably in a location away from his wife and children. Over the following months, from early 1991 through mid-1992, marshals conducted extensive ongoing surveillance of the Ruby Ridge property. They evaluated the situation as potentially high risk due to several factors: the extremely remote and elevated location of the cabin, the family's documented armed status, Weaver's repeated expressions of distrust toward federal authorities, and the family's clear history of refusing compliance with court orders. Multiple agencies became involved in the assessment and planning process, which I believe was the number one mistake, with the Marshals Service's Special Operations Group playing a central role. I think if they would have kept it with the SOG, with the Marshals, it would have developed better. Attempts at indirect communication were made through intermediaries, including continued contacts with the Griders, but direct engagement with Weaver remained limited. Throughout this period, Weaver and his family remained on the property, continuing their isolated lifestyle, while the active legal warrants persisted unresolved. By early 1992, the Marshal Service had formalized a three-phase operation plan to address the situation. Phase 1 focused on additional surveillance to determine the technical requirements needed for more advanced monitoring. I'll tell you, if they had done this now, they would have been better off because they would have had drones all of that. It probably would have gone over so much better.
Also, you got to remember something. I think also is important. Probably what was in the back of the mind of the marshals and all these other agencies is that this area, there is nobody else but like the Weavers and all these white nationalist anti-government militias.
Yeah.
So literally, it's not like they can just blend in. Like, oh yeah, we're just out doing some hunting.
They know everybody.
So if a bunch of dudes just start moving around in the woods, this will be noticed, and they're going to tell the Weavers, or they'll tell somebody else. And about most of these militias were involved in their own like criminal activities, to support themselves. So yeah, nobody's gonna take kindly to a bunch of marshals snooping around.
Yeah. In April 1992, marshals conducted further surveillance of the Weaver property and installed surveillance cameras on ridges overlooking the area. They also made several fact-finding trips onto the Weaver property itself. Acting Director of the Marshals Service, Hudson, approved the plan for Phase 2, during which the installed surveillance cameras would be used to gather detailed information about the Weavers' daily routines and movements. And I just want to note, a lot of people were like, well, they went on the property and blah, blah, blah. They had a warrant. The warrant is, when you have an arrest warrant, that warrant will state that they're allowed to make entry on the property and search anything within that property. So they could go on that property as much as they want to go look at anything. So they weren't out of the scope of their job. This intelligence would then inform options for Phase 3, the actual arrest operation. During their observations, marshals noted that the Weaver family typically responded to approaching vehicles or unfamiliar visitors by taking up armed defensive positions around the cabin until the individuals were recognized as non-threatening. Throughout 1991 and the first half of 1992, the Marshal Service considered and ultimately abandoned several potential arrest strategies. These include the use of negotiation teams or other intermediaries. Officials explored various ruses to lure Weaver away from the cabin to reduce the potential risk to Vicky Weaver and the children. Arthur Roderick was assigned primary responsibility for devising a suitable overall plan. At one point, the operation was internally codenamed Northern Exposure because they had quite literally had a northern exposure of the ridge. By mid-1992, after more than a year of continuous surveillance, intelligence gathering, and iterative planning, the U.S. Marshal Service finalized preparations for a reconnaissance mission. The goal of this mission was to obtain the most current intelligence possible and to identify viable opportunities for an arrest conducted at a safe distance from the immediate cabin area. The reason being is, number one, the cabin area was where everybody was living, but it's also where they believed all the guns were being kept as well. This extended period of preparation and assessment represented the culmination of the legal troubles that had begun years earlier with informant contacts in a single firearms transaction.
Does seem a lot of hassle for just 2 shotguns.
Yeah. The legal troubles had thus evolved from an initial informant introduction at public gathering through repeated meetings and a recorded weapons sale to a formal indictment and arrest via deception, bond conditions, a critical error in a probation notification, a missed court appearance, a bench warrant, a second indictment for failure to appear, and finally a prolonged multi-agency surveillance effort. Communication breakdowns, including the mistaken trial date and the probation letter and the family's refusal to engage with attorneys and pretrial services, exacerbated the situation. The Weaver family's profound distrust of federal authority, deeply intertwined with their religious and separatist convictions, reinforced their decision to remain on the property rather than surrender to the court process. Federal agencies concerned about the potential for violence and the safety of the children in the isolated mountain setting chose an approach centered on extended surveillance and careful planning rather than immediate confrontation. These accumulating factors created a tense, unresolved situation that had been building steadily for well over a year by the time summer 1992 arrived. With arrest warrants active and surveillance ongoing for over a year, the U.S. Marshal Service conducted a reconnaissance operation on the Weaver property in August 1992. What was intended as a careful intelligence-gathering effort would instead mark the beginning of a confrontation that rapidly escalated over the following days. So, on the morning of August 21st, 1992, a six-man team of specially trained U.S. Marshals from the Special Operations Group, or SOG, made their way onto the remote Weaver property in the rugged Selkirk Mountains of northern Idaho. The terrain was steep and heavily wooded, with narrow trails winding through dense forest, boulders, and underbrush that made movement slow and deliberate. The team had been preparing for this type of mission for months, focusing on stealth and observation to avoid direct contact near the cabin where the Weaver children were known to be present. The Marshals were outfitted in full camouflage gear designed to blend seamlessly into the mountainous environment. They carried a range of equipment, including radios for real-time communication, cameras to document observations, night vision devices for potential low-light conditions, and firearms for self-defense if needed. None of the Marshals wore bulletproof vests on this particular operation, although such protective gear was available through SOG resources.
Should have worn.
Big mistake.
Yeah.
It's definitely a police superstition where the day you don't wear your vest is the day you need it. It's all. Listen, if you're going to law enforcement, most agencies now require it. But back in the day, like when my dad first became a cop, it was not required. You had the option to wear your vest. Wear your fucking vest.
I'm sure if I remember correctly, this was still just a reconnaissance at this point. Correct. They didn't mean to actually engage with Randy Weaver.
Correct. But still, wear your vest.
Yeah, you never know when something's going to happen. Some random person can run up on the street while you're investigating something small and boom, game over.
Exactly. Wear your vest. It's going to save your life. Trust me. The team split into two distinct groups once they reached a key fork in the trails known as the Y, a junction identified earlier in surveillance as a strategic point for monitoring activity. One group, designated the Observation Post, or OP team, consisted of Deputy Marshal Dave Hunt, responsible for operating the camera equipment to record any movements or activity around the cabin. Deputy Marshal Joseph Thomas and Deputy Marshal Frank Norris. This OP team positioned itself on a ridge north of the cabin, at a distance that allowed them to observe without being easily detected. Their role was strictly limited to watching and documenting from afar. The second group, the reconnaissance or recon team, included Deputy Marshals Arthur Roderick, Larry Cooper, and William Bill Deegan, a 15-year veteran of SOG operations. This recon team advanced closer to the cabin area to scout the terrain more directly and assess potential sites for future operations. Roderick carried an M16A1 rifle. Yeah.
I always, when I was in the Air Force, we rarely saw those. We used to jokingly call them muskets.
Because we used M4s, but... Deegan was armed with an M16 rifle drawn from SOG resources. Cooper carried a suppressed 9mm Colt submachine gun. Beautiful. The recon team moved cautiously along the trails, aware of the remote and isolated location, which sat on a hillside overlooking Ruby Creek and offered natural defensive advantages to anyone familiar with the land.
These guys always get the nice toys.
I know. Listen, when I did this, I got some nice stuff. It was beautiful. A couple of guys carried Colts. They had 1911s, and they were beautiful. As the recon team proceeded through the woods, the Weaver family's yellow Labrador retriever named Striker picked up the scent or sound of the approaching marshals. Striker began barking loudly and persistently, running down the trail directly toward the marshal's position. Randy Weaver, his 14-year-old son Samuel Weaver, commonly referred to as, and family friend Kevin Harris heard the dogs barking and decided to investigate. They followed Striker down the trail, assuming the dog might have detected an animal such as a game animal or perhaps an intruder on their remote property. The family had been living in this isolated setting for years, and such responses to the dog's alerts were part of their daily routine in the mountains. The dog continued its charge towards the marshals. According to statements from the marshals involved, Roderick attempted to deter the dog by throwing rocks in its direction to test its reaction or drive it away without escalating the situation. Striker, however, persisted and closed in on the team. At that point, Roderick fired a single shot from his M16A1 rifle. The bullet struck the dog near its rear and exited through its chest, killing Striker instantly. The shooting of the family dog triggered an immediate, intense reaction from Sammy Weaver. Sammy shouted words along the lines of, "You shot my dog, you son of a bitch." Sounds like Dean, not Sammy. And raised his .223 caliber Ruger Mini 14 rifle, firing 3 shots in the direction of Roderick's position. Tell you right now, .223 is not anything to bark at. That is a gun that can do some damage. What followed was a brief but violent exchange of gunfire in the area known as the Y. The exact sequence of every individual shot and who fired first has been the subject of differing accounts in official reports and later testimony. Marshals described the situation as one in which they felt threatened and responded in self-defense. At the same time, accounts from the Weaver side portrayed the marshals as the aggressors who initiated deadly force by shooting the dog without provocation. Regardless of the precise order, a later ballistics report conducted as part of the official investigations documented that a total of 19 rounds were fired during the confrontation. The breakdown, based on shell casings recovered, bullet trajectories, and physical evidence at the scene, was as follows. 1 shot from Roderick's M16A1 that killed the dog Striker, 3 shots from Sammy Weaver's Ruger Mini 14 directed toward Roderick, 7 shots from Deegan's M16 rifle fired while Deegan himself moved at least 21 feet, directed toward Harris and the Weavers, 6 shots from Cooper's 9mm Colt submachine gun, also directed toward Harris and the Weavers, and 2 shots from Harris's 30-06 M1917 Enfield rifle. Give me that right now, please. Okay, so let's talk about shooting dogs. It's an unfortunate thing.
But sometimes it's necessary.
Sometimes it is necessary, especially if the dog is going to be aggressive. I will say they did not shoot the dog to shut it up. They shot the dog because they saw it as a threat.
And from what I understood, the dog actually did, from what the marshal said, the dog did
have an aggressive posture.
Yeah, it wasn't just...
Yeah.
I'm a little shocked. This is the first time I knew about the breed of the dog. I always assumed it was just a German Shepherd. But a lab, I'm not...
Depends on how it's raised.
Yeah, I guess. But I've always known labs not to be that aggressive.
Oh, they can be aggressive.
They can be. But, yeah, keep in mind, I've had the fortunate thing to never have to shoot a dog. I've had to tase a dog. I've had to pepper spray a dog. Because they weren't as aggressive. They were barking and kind of getting a little aggressive, but they weren't coming at me. So I did taser and pepper spray, and it was able to put them through. But I know people that have had to shoot dogs. It's just like a person. It's either you or the dog. And at the end of the day, I'm going home to my family. So, But yeah, so I don't want anybody to think that these marshals, and they're going to make mistakes later too, but I don't want people to think that they shot the dog just to shut it up. They shot the dog because it was aggressive.
Yeah. And besides, if shutting it up, so we gotta shut it up. Oh no. Okay, first of all, they already know you're there, and besides, shooting the dog to shut it up, it's like, I want you to think about that.
Exactly.
It's like,
Yeah.
So during this rapid exchange, Deputy U.S. Marshal William Deegan was struck in the chest by one of the shots fired from Harris's rifle and was killed. Vest. If he was wearing a vest, he would not have been killed. 223 is not going to go through his vest. Sammy Weaver was hit once in the arm and then fatally shot in the back while he was retreating up the trail toward the cabin. Keep in mind, if you are a danger to the public, which I know there's not much public out here, but if you are a danger to the public, you can legally be shot in the back and justified.
Harris had the 30-06, not the 223. That was Sammy.
I know.
Yeah, you said.
Oh, from Harris's rifle. Yeah. 30-06. Well, he didn't need to wear a vest because if he was wearing a vest, it would have blown a hole through him anyways.
Yeah.
Unless he was wearing a plate carrier, which wasn't as common back then. They would have been wearing standard Kevlar. The fatal shot to Sammy became a focal point of intense scrutiny in subsequent investigations, with ballistic evidence and shell casings found at various distances along the trail. Some reported as far as 450 feet up the hill, analyzed repeatedly to determine the origin. Kevin Harris was also fired during the incident and then retreated toward the cabin along with Randy Weaver.
That was supposed to be shot.
Yeah, probably. After the gunfire ceased, the surviving marshals immediately took cover and called for assistance via radio.
Shocked they even got a signal.
Yeah, the op team on the ridge had observed portions of the activity, but was not directly involved in the shooting. The marshals who had been engaged in the firefight remained with Deegan's body, while others, including Hunt and Thomas, made their way to a neighbor's house to summon help from the Marshal Service Crisis Center in Washington, D.C. Hunt reported that the surveillance team had come under fire from occupants of the Weaver compound and were pinned down in defensive positions. No further gunfire was heard after approximately 11:15 a.m.
Now, this is one thing I think you'll come at. Well, it might touch on it. The marshals have always maintained that they identify themselves as marshals in order for the Weavers to drop the guns, but Sammy had opened fire anyway, which led to the gunfight. And now, reading both of them, they're both versions, the Weavers and the marshals, are very plausible. But there is one thing that I think this is why I think the marshals' versions is wrong, and I don't think they were entirely truthful about it. I don't think they identify themselves, but I don't think they had to identify themselves, because I think the marshal that shot the dog was immediately came under fire from Sammy, and then the gunfire just started. So there's at no point where did they get the opportunity really to identify themselves at?
Yeah.
And if I remember right from the trial testimony that I found from Kevin, I think, right? Kevin Harris.
Yes.
Yeah.
He did not mention that the marshals identified themselves.
And again,
it seemed like as soon as Stryker was shot, Sammy lost his shit and fired.
Again, at what point would the marshals have had the opportunity to say, United States Marshals, throw your weapons down? You're going to really say that in the middle of as someone's shooting, you're getting shot at?
Yeah.
But again, though, they didn't, which is why I find the lie is, and again, I'm going to say it, I think they lied. I think they were trying to cover their ass. Once everything calmed down, they kind of realized, okay, let's go over what happened. They realized, did anybody say anything of who we were? Nope. Wrong. We did say that. Right? And they were just like, right. Okay, we got our story straight. And they did.
Yeah.
It was like, yeah, well, you just lied. In my opinion, they lied for no reason.
Yeah. So, by nightfall on August 21st, A massive multi-agency law enforcement response had been mobilized to the remote Ruby Ridge location. Again, big mistake. The U.S. Marshal Service Crisis Center was formally activated at 11:40 a.m. under the direction of Associate Director Duke Smith. The Marshal Service SOG was alerted and ordered to deploy additional personnel. The Boundary County Sheriff's Office mobilized officers to assist at the scene. The Idaho State Police were informed around 1 p.m. and began forming a command post near a neighboring residence known as the Row House. Idaho Governor Cecil Andrus declared a state of emergency in Boundary County, which allowed the use of Idaho National Guard Armory in Bonners Ferry, and after some initial logistical delays, authorized the deployment of National Guard armored personnel carriers to the area.
Now, again, I agree they probably should have tried to keep this footprint minimal, but also, as I said before, look at the area they're in. There's Aryan nations around. There's other militias around.
The way it is that where they were, their closest neighbors were the Aryan nation.
Yeah,
like they weren't They weren't in the same area.
I don't. Then you create a barrier. You surround the area away from this site and keep people out, but putting all of these boots on the ground in this site is what exacerbated everything. You had it's too many chefs in the kitchen. You have too many agencies that never work together.
Because you had the FBI, the ATF, the marshals, the National Guard, Sheriff's Department, and probably the cops.
And the state police.
Yeah. So you had a shit ton of agencies.
It's too much. U.S. Marshals should have handled it themselves, left it at that. Call more SOG in, I'm fine with that. Call the state police, because I'll take state police over city and county because they're a more militarized police unit. It's just the way state police work. Call them to the surrounding area to make sure that you don't get the Aryan nations or anything like that coming in. But it should have stayed. So, but additional federal agencies joined the response. The U.S. Border Patrol provided support, and the FBI was notified of the deaths and the ongoing situation. The FBI would later deploy its hostage rescue team, but on August 21st, the immediate focus was on securing the perimeter around the Weaver cabin and tending to the fallen marshal. Law enforcement personnel from these various agencies arrived throughout the afternoon and evening, establishing positions in the difficult mountainous terrain. Helicopters were used to ferry personnel and equipment to the site, while ground teams worked to set up perimeters and observation posts. And with that, friends, we're going to make this a two-parter. This is going a little bit longer. We still have quite a bit to get through. And I have a lot of commentary on this. Again, this was kind of my wheelhouse, this whole thing, obviously long before I did it. But this is kind of what I did, so I have a lot of opinions on this.
This is also probably one of the most defining law enforcement incidents in the late 20th century, which even today, agencies throughout the U.S. and even international study this incident as how to kind of like the do's and don'ts of a high risk, sensitive operation.
Yep. So we're gonna pick this back up next week and go inside the cabin, see what's happening with the family and the Weavers and Sammy and all of that. So, yeah, I want to thank everybody for joining us tonight in the Scarlet Tavern, where the candles burn low, stories burn deep, and the truth is always one drink away. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
Right.